Hello everyone, I do hope you already had a good DynamicsCon event until today. Today's last session will be performed by me. My name is Arnaud de Calavon. I work for To Increase, but I'm doing this session on personal titles. I'm not the spokesman of my company, and I will tell you a bit more about the organization hierarchies in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. And some of the features I will tell about today are also applicable to Dynamics 365 human resources. A bit of the agenda for today. I will first elaborate on the architectural organizations for the hierarchy. What is it? How can we use it? Then I will talk about the difference between an organization hierarchy versus a position hierarchy in Dynamics 365. I will also go through what are the real purposes of setting up and using the organization hierarchies in the system. And I will also elaborate a bit more on some additional financial features which you can use using those hierarchies. And as cherry on the cake, we'll talk about organization hierarchies as a framework. And I prepared as an example to use the organization hierarchies together with a record level security option called Extensible Data Security. But let's get started with the architecture. Back in 2009, Microsoft introduced a new concept which was called a global address book, and that address book started with a party in the system. A party could be a person or an organization, but still not defined where it was used. It was more a kind of global feature to define which persons and which organizations are familiar in my environment, but not determined yet if it was a role of a customer or a vendor. Now, if we go a level further, positive thing on the parties is that you could create relationships between the parties. So if you had two organizations, it could be a mother and a branch, but also if you had a person, you could set up this person is a contact person of a certain customer in the system. But still, the party relationships has nothing to do with the organization hierarchies. It's just an internal reference who belongs to each other, but also, for example, you could set up this person is the spouse of another person. Just the way how you would like to do it. A step deeper, if you look at the organizations, then we can have external organizations like a customer, a vendor, whatever, but also internal organizations. And an internal organization, for example, can be a legal entity, but also, for example, an operating unit or a team in the system. A legal entity is just a kind of the company where you want to register some data, and operating units can be defined into 5 different types. It could be a business unit, a cost center, department, a value stream, and a retail channel. And good thing is that we can use those operating units and legal entities for the organization hierarchies, but we can also enable them all as being a financial dimension in the system. Now, when you paid attention and if you are a bit familiar with more the development and non-production environments, then you also might have seen an operating unit called region, for example. There are some additional operating units in development environments, but those belong to an example for the fleet management. They're not part of the production environment. So if you do need an operating unit called region, then you should develop your own one. And the good thing about this is you can actually extend it. Now, when we now know about the concept of internal organization, which could be a legal entity, operating unit, or a team, then we can talk about the relationships between the internal organizations, and those can be defined in a certain organization hierarchy. But not all of them. The teams will be faded out because that is not an operating unit or not an internal organization which can be used in an organization hierarchy. If we have defined all the relationships, we can also tell what is the real purpose of an organization hierarchy. And I will come back to those purposes in some minutes after a demo. When we go to the next slide, what we can do in finance and operations, we can model our organization in different ways. So we can look at it from multiple perspectives. We can create multiple relationships, starting with, for example, legal entities, and per legal entity, which business units do we have, or we can also start with the business unit and define which legal entities are part of a certain business unit. But we can also create organization hierarchies based on relationships between the departments and cost centers, for example. Now, all organizations we define in the system are date effective, meaning we can set up a change and make it effective, or plan to publish it for the future. Meaning that still today we work with certain relationships and a set of cost centers effective today, but already plan that, for example, the 1st of October should have another structure in the system. Also, the organization hierarchies using the purposes, and I will come back to that one, to have some feature support in the applications. Because if there's no feature support, then why would you set up an organization hierarchy? It's not for fun. You should do it for a certain reason. And as mentioned in the previous slide already, each operating unit type can also be enabled as a financial dimension, meaning if you do set up departments in the system, you can also directly use them as financial dimensions. I'll come back to that one later as well. And what you can also do is the organization hierarchies in the system is extensible. So what you can do is, for example, create a new operating unit type, and using the correct code patterns, it's also directly enabled as both an operating unit type, but also a financial dimension. A quick comparison between organization hierarchy and a position hierarchy. Well, if you look at the energy here, well, both are okay, but they have a totally different purpose in the system. The organization hierarchies is more about the internal organizations, how they are grouped together and how you want to look at it. For the position hierarchy, it's all based on positions, and person can be linked to a certain position. So in that way, the position hierarchy will be used to determine a managerial hierarchy, for example. The internal organizations do have some application support, like you can use it for structuring the financial dimensions, create some relationships in between. You can also use it, for example, for defining which legal entities are used for centralized payments. And the position hierarchy at the other side can be used as a managerial hierarchy for workflow assignments. So a quick comparison, they are totally separated and totally different purposes in the system. Coming back to the hierarchies themselves, I will do a quick demo on how you can maintain a hierarchy in the system. First, quickly, we go to the organization administration menu, where we can see we do have legal entities as organizations, but we also have the operating units and the teams, like explained in the architectural picture. If you look at operating units, then we can define and set up, maintain cost centers, retail channels, and all kind of different internal operating units. We can create a new one, and then we can choose which one to use. And like mentioned, the branch, the rental location, and the region, those three are not part of the standard application. They're just an example in a demo and development environment. If we want to create a new cost center, for example, we can click on it and provide a name, Finance Global, and save the record. Now come back to the organization hierarchies. We can open the form We can set up multiple perspectives and multiple views on your organization. So what you can do is create multiple hierarchies. And I will pick the first one as example to show you just one of the examples. I will come back to another one later today. We can view how it looks like. It starts with a business unit auto, and below this business unit, we do have some departments, and not all departments linked to the main group are visible. So we have an arrow to see which other departments are also linked to the first node. Go back and one level deeper, we do have the trade shows, and it would be possible also to focus, for example, on the sales and marketing. So now we can see the trade shows, marketing campaigns, outlet, and all the others. Then it doesn't stop with this 3 levels. We can still insert new nodes below. But before being able to do that, we have to use the edit button, because if we are currently in a view mode, we click on the edit, where we can insert new nodes. Now, currently the main one is selected. So if we now click insert, there will be a new node on this level. And I want to insert a new cost center just below the finance department. So then first I have to select the finance node. Then I can click on insert, and I want to insert a cost center today. And the cost center will be the finance global I just created. Now when we close this form, this is one of the really rare forms in the system where you really have to use the save button before leaving the form. Otherwise your changes are lost. So we have to click the save before leaving it. Now we can close it, and in fact it's still working today with the old version. So if we go to view again and click on edit, now the system will ask you, do you want to keep on working the draft, or do you want to delete all the changes and start again? Now this feature can be used to just work on several days on a certain draft if you need to do more changes, more structures, and if other people also have to do some reviews on it, then you can work on a draft until it's fully approved and correct, and then you can publish your new version of the hierarchy. So I will keep on using the draft today. And in that way, with that mode, you can also see the finance global again coming up here. Now, if we want to change, or if we want to publish this hierarchy, then we have to be careful and know what we want to do. We can choose an effective date, but the effective date, we can only publish one version on a certain date. So if we want to publish it today, and we found out that there's an issue, then we can only make it effective tomorrow if we need another change. So if you have a first initial version and think this would be okay, then probably you can use the first of the year, or maybe a date in last year, to have just an initial version, and you have all kind of space to publish all the changes. Now, when this is really a correct and approved version, then we can say, I want to have this one effective as of the 1st of October this year. We can also provide some description on what had been changed. I will leave it for today. When we publish it, then it has been published with an effective date in the future. When we close it and open it again, as of today, the finance global cost center is not active. What we can do is look at it from a certain date. We can choose which effective dates do we have. So we can see there are several versions already in the system. When we select the latest version, then we can see our new cost center in this hierarchy. But we can also look at the calendar and just pick any date to know, well, if we are on August 13, what is the situation now? So I'll leave it for now for this demo. Go back to the slides. where we'll talk about the purposes in the system. And the purposes is about, well, which application areas do have some additional features on using the hierarchies in the system. And I will highlight some of them with a different color. I do have some experience, and if you look at security, a lot of experience on these purposes in the system. Just a small recap of the centralized payments, for example. The question is, do I need to set up an organization hierarchy to be able to use the centralized payments? Then the question is, the answer to that question is no. How does it help you in the system? If you do set up a centralized payments as a purpose for an organization hierarchy, all legal entities in the hierarchy will be automatically selected when you do a centralized payments proposal. If you don't have it, then you have to enable all the legal entities manually again and again. So it's a kind of just a small help to automatically select which legal entities belong to a certain group for the centralized payments. And the project management, if you enable an organization hierarchy for the project management, then it would be possible to view all projects across legal entities, or you can just quickly switch to another legal entity and see which projects are available in another legal entity without really switching the full company in the top right corner. For security, if you want to learn about it more, then I have written some blogs on automatic role assignment, where it also the security is used to assign organizations and not have everyone access to all legal entities, but just a certain group of legal entities. If you want to learn more, just try to visit the documentation on the internet. It has a small description for each of the purpose. And if you do have more questions, you can always reach out after this event by sending an email, and I would be happy to help you. Just a small example. What we can do is, if we go to the organization hierarchy purposes, we have all the purposes as already shown on the page. The funny thing is, if you go to Dynamics 365 Human Resources, you will also see all these purposes, but they're not all used. Only I'm aware that you can use the security and organization chart, and the others I haven't checked if they're really still used. Probably the benefits control can be used over there. But if you look at the security, we can actually assign more than one organization hierarchy to be able to be used within the hierarchies. But we can also add, for example, the Contoso holdings as a certain purpose. Now, where is it used? If we go to the security administration, and for example, go to assign users to roles, I do have the accountant role. Now, if I go to Brook, for example, there's a button for assigning organizations, and there are multiple places where this has been used. This one is automatically assigned, so I can't change this one. I have to go to Nova. She has a manual assigned. Go to assign organizations, and we can choose which legal entities especially. And initially, it will show all legal entities, but if we use the drop down, then you'll see all the organization hierarchies linked to the purpose security. So for example, we can now also use the Contoso holdings, and we have it available as a tree view now. For example, the Contoso Entertainment Systems is having the Germany and the USA company. When we right click this one, we can grant the Contoso Entertainments, including all children. What you'll see is not the organizations are not individually. It's just one organization, including all children part of this level of the organization hierarchy. If we remove all others from the view, revoke, then we can see in the selected legal entities already a preview of the result. So with just one assignment, we will give access to 3 different legal entities. And what happens if there will be a new legal entity part of this node as a new child in the future? In that case, also, in this case, Nova in the role accountant will have access to that new legal entity in the future. So it will ensure that the maintenance will be less, but you have to be aware exactly all organization hierarchies are used. You can share them across different purposes. So for example, I use this one for the security, but the same could be used for decentralized payments, for example. But if you want to distinct between the legal entities visible for the security and for decentralized payments, in that case, you need to set up 2 different hierarchies. Go back to the presentation. What you can do, some additional financial features, not only within the system, but also outside. You can use the organization hierarchies if it has been determined on the business units, the departments and cost centers, for example. Those are also the financial dimensions. You can use them as a row definition for the management reporter. Below you'll see the difference also between the AX2012 form and how it now looks in Dynamics 365. The purpose is the same, but if you look at the form design, I preferred myself the way how it has been designed and look and feel in AX2012. And another feature within the application itself is that you can enforce the dimension relationships on general journal entry in the system. And for that one, I will also do a quick demo today. Going back to the application. What we have to do then is go to the general ledger, and on the account structures, we can define, for example, I will pick the manufacturing P&L today. Here we can say we have the main accounts, all profit and loss accounts, and we have a business unit, department, cost center, and an item group. If we have the account structure in an edit mode, then we can change it. And I will today only show the results. If we go to the relationships, then we can enable or disable, include the relationships on different relations. So what we can see, for example, we have the hierarchy auto business unit, and it has been determined that over there is a relationship between the business unit and the department, but also vice versa, but also between a business unit and cost center and department and cost center. So we can choose which one to use, but also from our other organization hierarchies where the department, business center, and the financial dimensions defined in this account structure is used. And for now, I only selected the auto business unit between department and cost center. And I will show you the results also in a financial journal. Then we have to go to the general journals, go to the lines. I already prepared a bit of the lines in the system. If we look at, for example, the account here, it's already pre-populated with a business unit and a department. We do have a lot of cost centers, but if now the department 23 has been chosen, we can only see the 4 cost centers related to the operations department. The same is valid if we go to account, the other account where we didn't define business unit yet. So the business unit is not part of the relationship here. So if we now look at the cost centers, we'll see a different set of cost centers available for the sales and marketing department. So this way you can restrict and maintain also the relationships between the departments and the cost centers, Another option would be indeed to be able to define those relations in the account structure itself. But if there's a change in the future, you have to do some maintenance on the account structures and also on the correct time, because it will be effective directly. And when you use the organization hierarchies, you can plan for changes in the future. So if in the future I enabled the cost center for the finance department, it won't be visible today, but it will be visible in the future. And also, if we now change the date to another date, for example, in the past, then it might be the case that, for example, the call center, if that was added as part of the 1st of June, that with a posting date before June, it won't be an option. That will be also date effective based on the organization hierarchy definitions. Because I also want to explain how we can use it more as a framework in the system. So what we can do is, it's pretty much clear. What we can do is add internal organization types in the system. It's based on a certain enumeration in the system, which has been identified as extensible in Dynamics 365 for finance operations. But if you do it in AX 2012, then it's still a kind of overlaying. But also, not only you can extend internal organization types, but you can also think of probably extend the hierarchy purposes with a new purpose, and you can define in an ISV solution or probably in a customization. Also use the internal organization hierarchies in a complete new purpose, for example. I have some experience how we did it in the past. But also what would be possible is use the internal organizations and the hierarchy as input for certain extensible data security. I will also elaborate what it is and explain about the example I used it. If you want to do something with extensible data security, then you have to do some development in the system, but it's all based on extensions, so it won't harm the standard or it won't affect the standard application. And just quickly, what is the extensible data security? It is a new feature introduced already in AX 2012, where you can say or set up some data security on table records, but not only which records will be visible or not, but also you can define based on what situation is a person able to update or create new records. So for example, it would be possible to define that a certain user is able to see all customers in the system for all customer groups, but is only allowed to create, update, or delete customers which belong to a certain customer group 90, for example. And that's quite powerful in the system. And not only you do set up the security for one table, but you can also define multiple related constraint tables. So if a certain person is not able to see, for example, certain customers, like we have now in the example left, we can only see the customers for customer group 30 and 90, then it can be also inherited by, for example, sales orders or projects or any other related table in the system. Before, well, in AX 2012 and before, we also had a record level security. A quick comparison between those two. Well, if you look at the energy, then you already see my opinion that I don't like the record level security anymore, but I fully support the extensible data security with my energy. The record level security was a form-based query, so it was only enforced on the forms, but not on all data access in the system, whereas using extensible data security, it's enforced on all data actions in the system. You had to set up a rule per table for the record level security, where you can define a policy in the with help of extensible data security, also short XDS, with just one primary table, but many multiple related tables. So you can set up just one policy rule, which will have an effect on multiple tables directly. With the record level security, you had to set up the record level security for all roles where there was a table access. And you could also set up multiple different queries per assigned role, but then it would be accumulating things. With the extensible data security, it can't be overridden when you select it on just one single role, or just if it's a global policy, then it can't be overridden with any access with another setting in the system. But if you also look at the level, the record level security, it has been completely deprecated. In AX 2012, it was still available, but in Dynamics 365, it's a sole and the only solution which can be used to do row, so the record-based security in the system. I will not spend that much time on this one, but what you have to do is define a certain query, what would be able to be visible for a certain user based on a certain primary table. In this example left, it would be a customer table. And then you can define which more related constraint tables are part of a certain single policy in the system. And within the policies, you can have a global one, or you can make it effective for only certain rules in the system. And you can also enable it in coding, that you say, well, I want to have this policy now applicable when I do a certain action. Then you can enable or disable the policies in X++ coding. The result is that normally, if you have a form query, open the customer table, it will select just all data from the customer table. And using the query constraint with XCS, it will add a certain part to the query on any data action for that user. So that means if he's trying to open it using a report or a form, or maybe any other customization that had been built, if a user is using the customer table, in that case, it's always enforced as part of the kernel getting data from the SQL server. So you can't override it. I'll show you an example how to use the hierarchies and XTS together if we don't have any constraints in the system. So for example, if we go to the retail and commerce and go to all stores, for example, what we see is there's quite a long list in this demo environment with retail stores with all kind of different regions, but also different type of operations in it. And as part of the organization, as administration, there are some organization hierarchies out of the box already in the demo environment. For example, we do have some retail stores by business unit, but also by region. If I pick this one as an example, quickly have a view on it, then we can see, well, for the Contoso retail, we do have some main business units: electronics, sporting, and fashion. And for the electronics, we do have some retail channels: Boston, Contoso, Moscow, but also a lot more. And the sporting and the fashion are linked to different retail channels in the system. Now, what I will show now is a kind of customization. I created a new extensible data policy where I defined, in a certain case, I want to link a user with an hierarchy or individual records using the security framework. So what I will do now is first I will show that also those two retail stores organization hierarchies are linked to the purpose security. When we go to the system administrator and want to assign users to a certain role, then we go to the retail operations manager role, and one of them is Chris, and Chris does not have any organizations assigned yet. And I will close this one, the legal entities, because it's not showing up what you selected as a result because that is only acting on the legal entity selections. Initially, the list is empty, and when the list is empty, Chris will be able to see all legal entities, just like, not all legal entities, all retail channels. So I can quickly go to another session for Chris. If you don't constrain anything, then Chris would be able to open, for example, the all stores, the same list page as I showed in the administrator mode. Initially, he will see all the retail channels as well. So go back to the setup. When we grant access to specific organizations, we can, for example, use the business unit and say Chris is responsible for all electronics grant with children, but in addition, he will also manage the Paris store. So in fact, we only assigned electronics and Paris here as part of his retail operations manager role. Now, when we go to the session from Chris, so this is Chris again, when we refresh the browser, it will reload the same page, and also in this case, the security will be applied that he will only see the retail channels and so the stores he's responsible for. So in this way, you can secure it effectively, and as mentioned, it is a customization, but I do have an example explained in a blog, and you can also download the policies and related setup on my OneDrive, from a OneDrive for both AX2012 and Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. This is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you for attention, and be aware there are new sessions tomorrow, so the DynamicsCon event will be continued. Hopefully you will join us tomorrow as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.